Will much of the Vatican's greatest works of art soon go missing? Joining us with his dispatch, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, from what you've just learned, could the Church soon lose many of her priceless and irreplaceable works of art, like even the Obelisk in St. Peter's Square?
Brad, Pope Francis made some very worrying remarks to this effect, flying back from Hungary on Sunday morning.
So why would the Pope say that various works of art in the Vatican museums and whatever should be returned?
Because he has bought into the leftist narrative that much or some of the Vatican Museum's priceless art has been stolen and needs to be returned to its rightful owner.
Okay, so what exactly is the Pope saying about the works of art in the Vatican museums and even the Obelisk in St. Peter's Square? And to whom did he say this?
Well, the Associated Press reporter asked him this question on board the papal plane. And as we know, there have been rumblings, particularly after his visit to Canada, with indigenous people making similar demands. And this is what Pope Francis said. He said, the seventh commandment comes to mind. If you steal something, you've got to give it back. In the case where you can return things, where it's necessary to make a gesture, better do it. And then, Brad, he goes on to say, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But in those cases where you can make restitution, please do it. It's good for everyone. So don't you get used to putting your hands in someone else's pockets, clearly implying that the Vatican has been stealing the stuff from indigenous people. And then he went on to say, and if tomorrow the Egyptians come and ask for the obelisk, what will we do? I mean, yeah.
Okay, so where is the Pope getting this woke narrative from?
There has been a movement called post-colonial studies. And one of the things post-colonial scholars do is to bash up, white people, colonialism, particularly Christian missionaries, claiming that they were oppressors, that they were supremacists, that they eroded the cultures of indigenous peoples. Actually, far from that, they promoted local cultures. And one of them is supposedly a Catholic by the name of Gloria Bell. And this is what she says in an article, a peer-reviewed article published in a Catholic peer-reviewed journal. She's very careful because she knows that there is no evidence, not a shred of evidence to prove that these artifacts were stolen. And she goes on to say that the Pontifical Missionary Exhibition, which took place from 1924 to 1926, called by Pius XI, it had over 100,000 exhibits from missionaries sent as gifts by the indigenous peoples from all over the world, all the 5 continents. And what she does is she says this was so Roman in the sense of like ancient Roman emperors paraded the treasures they had captured from various captive peoples. Pope Pius XI was doing something similar, and he was sending out a message of silent eloquence of the heroism of missionary work. And then she says that this missionary work functioned as reminders of the triumph of missionaries and the suppression of alternative religious beliefs. She goes on to say something very, very woke. She says, from the moment visitors entered the exhibition, the Catholic white male heteronormativity ordering of vision pulled them into the space. That should tell you everything you need to know about this, Brad.
Okay, so if the Pope has, say, a spear or a feather from the Aztec people, and she's upset that would somehow be a triumphalistic, saying Christ's, authentic, true, salvific church is somehow triumphing over the pagan worship of the Aztec people, that's not a good thing, I take it.
Well, she's saying that absolutely, but ironically, if you read what Pope Pius XI was trying to do, and if you read the Vatican Museum's website, which is, which is now called Anima Mundi, Soul of the World. They basically say that the Vatican was showcasing the treasures of indigenous peoples to the world. And the indigenous peoples were delighted to have, there are 6 million people who troop into the Vatican museums every year. Where else would they get such a glorious platform?
Okay, well, that's an excellent point there, that we're not trying to triumph over people. We're actually showcasing the greatest things that they have, their cultural heritage. How you've been beating the pavement out there already on this story with some gumshoe journalism. How are your experts in Rome, your contacts in Rome, responding to this claim, first of all, that the art is stolen, being warehoused, misappropriated art, and it must be given back? What are they saying about that and the whole woke narrative behind it?
Well, I spoke to a very prominent Roman historian and to an art expert, and both of them told me that Pope Francis is virtue signaling, that there is, again, they said, no evidence whatsoever that this art was stolen. They talked about how the existence of the art collected in the Vatican museums is so precious. And in fact, Pope Francis himself, he has a kind of distaste or disdain for art. He doesn't seem to be very cultured. And so he couldn't care about, Greek or Roman or Byzantine or Renaissance or Baroque art. But he's taken so much of an interest in this particular collection because it kind of reflects his own social justice ideology, and giving it back in one sense also is art fulfilling a social justice function. But they are very worried, particularly about things like the obelisk.
Well, now, exactly with the obelisk, before we move on, what did he actually say about that specifically?
He specifically told me that the obelisk is 4,000 years old. It was transported from Egypt by Emperor Caligula and installed in what was the Vatican Valley, then later brought to the spot where it currently is. But for this historian, why this is so precious is because this was probably the last thing St. Peter and the Christian martyrs saw as they were being tortured and killed by the Emperor Nero. And this is also the last thing he says. The obelisk would have seen them on the flip side. And it's been here for such a long time, and it's so pivotal to the whole Vatican conglomeration, architectural conglomeration. Bernini would have a fit if he even thought the Pope was, planning to give it back to Egypt.
And you're saying Emperor Caligula actually brought that from Egypt while Egypt was part of the Roman Empire?
Absolutely. So Egypt was not a foreign country. Egypt, 100 years before Caligula, Egypt had become a part of the Roman Empire. And this is what the historian was at pains to explain to me.
Okay, before we run out of time, has Francis already started giving away priceless works of art from the Vatican?
Well, in March, interestingly, he gave 3 pieces away to 3 pieces of the Parthenon back to Greece, the Eastern Orthodox Patriarch of Greece. Hieronymus, was thrilled and praised him to the skies for doing that. But my historian friend, art historian friend, tells me that this was basically a poke in the eye of the Brits, because the British have had the Elgin marbles, also known as the Parthenon Parthenon marbles for years, and they have refused to give it back. And Rishi Sunak, in fact, 10 days before Pope Francis is giving back the marbles, the Parthenon fragments, Rishi Sunak said, "We are not going to give this back to Greece." My friend also thinks that Pope Francis is getting a bit back for what Britain did to Argentina in the Falklands War.
Okay, shifting gears for a moment, Jules, these statements were made on the Pope's return from Hungary. While in that very Catholic nation of Hungary, the Pope used so-called ideological colonization to torpedo, actually, gender ideology and abortion.
Absolutely, Brad. Before that, let me also add that the Pope has given King Charles 2 fragments of the true cross, which will be embedded in his processional cross. And that is, again, hugely ironic, because I have read the service of the coronation for the 6th of May, and Charles clearly promises to uphold the true Protestant and Reformed faith, not the Catholic faith. Coming to the bit about ideological colonization, yes, Pope Francis must be commended for coming down very strongly on gender ideology and abortion and putting them under the rubric of ideological colonization, which again is a bit ironic because he himself is buying into the ideological colonization of woke and historians and activists. But let's give him the credit for doing that, particularly at a time when Viktor Orban has been passing laws that will end the whole LGBT propagandization and brainwashing of school children. So even though they have 2 very different visions of Christianity, Francis and Orban, in this matter, Pope Francis has joined hands with Orban and is standing shoulder to shoulder with him.
Well, most likely because Orban is embedded in such a Catholic country that's been Catholic for well over 1,000 years and boasts of having 2 and 3 citizens Catholic there. Well, Jules, thank you very much for it's refreshing to have such clarity from Pope Francis on abortion and gender ideology, but as usual, you never know exactly what he'll say off the cuff on his rather now notorious in-flight interviews. Jules, thanks for your reporting and your spot-on analysis.
Thank you, Brad.